On today's show, we get to hear thoughts from Rod Brind'Amour over the weekend as he talked about goaltending situations and injuries that happened early on in camp, and also get to hear his thoughts on the Seth, Jarvis, and Martin Necas deals. And finally, we get to preview preseason Hurricanes hockey. That and much more on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I'm also the columnist for the Chicago Wolves, going over the Wolves weekly, and also just started out over there as the Dallas Stars columnist as well. I'm the host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. As I said, we got a fun and packed show for you guys today as we get to listen to Rod Brind'Amour's thoughts on Saturday as he talked about the goaltending situation, what the Hurricanes might do for the upcoming season. Also talking about the injuries that happened early on in camp, and get to hear his thoughts from Monday's practice, talking about Seth Jarvis and Martin Necas' deals. And then we finally get to round out with the preseason Game 1 preview against Tampa Bay Lightning later tonight in Tampa. But before we do all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So like I said, we get to jump into listen to Rod Brind'Amour as he gets to go over, the early season early training camp injuries that happened to William Carrier and Scott Morrow. But thankfully, we do have an update. Scott Morrow is back after feeling funky late last week. He was able to practice with the C2 group on Monday morning with the Hurricanes. So at least there's one guy that's already back. But William Carrier is still unfortunately out. But we get to hear his thoughts on all of that. And also, they did ask him about what is the possibilities of what the goaltending is going to do this year. Are we looking at a rotation? Is it going to be one over the other? And all of that stuff. So it'd be very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what Rod Brind'Amour's thoughts are on all that. So without further ado, let's hand it over to listen to the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes talking all about that right now.
Did William get looked out yesterday? And do you have any update on the situation?
Probably be out a couple days. I don't anticipate it being very long. This time of year, you're really being cautious on everything, so nothing serious.
Preseason coming up, pretty quick for you guys. You like that kind of shorter turnaround time from training camp to the first preseason game?
I don't know. I honestly, preseason games are tough. I like the practice time. I know guys need a couple games just to get a little bit of rust off, but it's changed so much now, and we've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, guys are ready we could play today, and we have a lot of mistakes, but as far as the conditioning and all that, they come ready to go. So, I don't know. To be honest, I like it when they're all done.
How do you envision handling the goaltenders this year? Do you want to have a guy who handles more of the load, or are you comfortable going?
I think it's all up for grabs, kind of. I mean, we've always kind of shared the workload, and that's really, I think, served us well. So, I mean, I honestly, we got two good ones, and we got Marty here too. If something happens. So I think we feel pretty good about that position, and we really don't give it much thought.
Are you at all worried about depth beyond those guys? You got two guys who've never even played in the AHL. One of them is probably going to have to.
I think if you got three guys you can count on, that's pretty good. I mean, I don't envision too many teams have four guys and worrying about that far down. If you get that far down, then you've had disaster hits. So, the other guys are unknown, but I think we still feel pretty good about them.
How's the adjustment for the new guys been so far? Learning the system for guys like Sean Walker and some of the others.
Yeah, that's a question for them.
Yeah.
I love how we've done 3 days work. I mean, it's very professional, and that's kind of how we set it up. We got kind of two groups that one should be professional and one should be a little more learning. But the new guys that have come into that group, the professional group, have certainly looked good.
We saw Cam spending a lot of time in the stands with Gleb while you guys were practicing.
Yeah.
How have you liked how he's how Cam has integrated himself into the team? And
I mean, it was a great hire. We knew that. You know, I thought time I've spent with him, which has been pretty extensive, to be honest. He's been here a long time. Spent a lot of time with him, and I think he's going to be a real good coach for those guys. And, you know, he's got a real willingness to teach. And really, at all coaches, that's what you're doing. But especially at that level where it's all young kids that trying to learn the game, they have all the skills, but it's just getting all the details in the game. So I think he's a great fit.
Do you have a plan for preseason about how many games each of the guys are going to play?
Do I have a plan?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But you know how plans go. So there's certain rules that you got to have X amount of guys, and that kind of throws a jammer if guys get a groin pull or something and you want to, you know. So, but, you know, like I said, the guys come ready to go, so I don't know how, like, it's not like we need a ton of games. So, yeah, we definitely have a plan.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.
Big thanks to Rod Brind'Amour talking to the media. And yeah, just looking back on, you know, what he was talking about injury wise, you know, you knew Carey is going to be out for a little bit longer, not too much about that. Turn to the goaltending situations too. You look at how the Hurricanes were last year, you know, it was one of those things where Pierre Kochetkov had to play a lot more games just because of Anthony Raanta struggling. At one point, they had to pick up Spencer Martin on waivers. Frederick Anderson was out with his blood clotting issue. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it was getting pretty bad for the Hurricanes pretty fast where, yeah, it's good to have three good goalies in your system. And, yeah, if you're down to your third with a possible your fourth is your backup, and then if your third gets hurt, then you're in a very bad situation. The Hurricanes were pretty close to that last year, but luckily it kind of worked out to where they got Martin, they got a fourth that definitely helped them out when they really needed to. And then when Freddie came back, it would turn into your three goalies with Piotr and Anderson kind of flip-flopping every other game. Spencer Martin was there to pick up a couple games here and there and play the last game of the season. Unfortunately, Raanta had to go down to Chicago, but it was one of those things where it kind of worked out for the Hurricanes later on in the year. But yeah, it was getting pretty close to being a all hands on deck situation with the goalies. So where I do agree with Rod that it's good to have three good goalies because the fact that, you shouldn't really have to worry too much. But if you do hit to your fourth string goalie, which for the Hurricanes could be Jan Peretz, then yeah, you're running into a situation where maybe you have to look to outside sources, but the hope is you don't have to worry about that very much. He did mention about the plans for preseason, which we will talk about later on in this episode, about what some of the rules are in terms of what can you do for filling out some rosters. Just make sure to stick around for later on in the shows. We'll talk about that. But yeah, just Rod Brind'Amour's thoughts early on, injuries that it happens. It's one of those things we were just trying to, take it easy first few practices and you don't want to get too crazy in terms of just also, you got preseason games coming up. You got to make sure you aren't going through a lot of guys really fast and stuff like that. And, he even said, the NHL guys are so ready right now that, yeah, you could start playing regular season games, but, everyone needs kind of a few games to ramp up. But that just goes to show you the difference of hockey 10, 15 years ago to where you needed multiple preseason games to get ready to where now guys are working out in the off season. They're, while they're taking it easy, they're still, getting in shape, and they're basically ramping up before preseason even starts or even camp, and they're pretty much already, jonesing to go. So it's definitely a big thing where you look at preseason and camp now to where guys are just, they could start playing regular season games right now compared to then where it's like, yeah, you needed those 4, 5, 6, 7 games. So definitely a lot of things for sure. So we do get to listen to Rod Brind'Amour talk a little bit more for after Monday's practices, as he talks about the Seth, Jarvis, and Martin Necas deal. So make sure to stick around as we'll go over that and listen to it here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is with FanDuel at FanDuel.com. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 1, we are going to jump into, Rod Brind'Amour's press conference from Monday after practice as he gets to talk about the new deals with Seth, Jarvis, and Martin Necas, and what, answering questions about what they're hoping for with Martin Necas this upcoming season for the Carolina Hurricanes. So without further ado, let's jump into Monday's audio press conference with Rod Brind'Amour as he met with media.
I guess we didn't really get to talk to you about this, but Seth's new contract, how much does that help just push that stuff out of the mind for him, you think, and just let him continue to progress as the player?
I think it's always good to get, contracts out of the way and guys don't have to deal with it. I don't know if it affects you much. Your job's, whether you're on a 100-year deal or a 1-year deal, you go out and play. So, but you don't have to hear about it and talk about it. And, there's some peace of mind, that's for sure, for the player.
Is that true for Necas, too? Just having 2 years and not...
So. He's kind of gone through it all his life here. It feels like we're always half talking about it, but I think just to not have, everyday question about what's next year, we clearly don't have to deal with that. But, I think it's just peace of mind.
There's talks with Necas about trying to earn a bigger role. What's your expectations for him going to the season?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what more role he can do. He's on the power plays. Maybe he wants to kill penalties. Maybe if we go to a number 1 only unit, then obviously he'd be on that. But I don't really know that the role. We expect him to be one of our best players and have for many years. And we're obviously just going to count on him more. I think that's the difference. It's not playing a bigger role. I think it's just naturally. It's going to happen just based on the fact that we don't have the depth maybe that we had in those positions, and so we're going to rely on, I think, him and Svesh and Seabass and Jarvie a little more than maybe we had to in the past.
You have a certain number of veterans you need to play in the preseason games. Do you have an idea yet of what that group is?
Yeah, we plan it out, but everything changes day to day, so it's going to be very similar to the past 6 years we've done this.
How much of a stark contrast do you feel like it is for you when you're working with the first group, the prospects, and having to teach them things rather than this other group where you're kind of cleaning?
It's been pretty good, though. It's nice to have the way we set it up so we're not stopping everything, and you have one group that should know what's going on a little better. Even though there's new guys, they can just, follow the lead. That the other group doesn't have that, so you go in there and expecting that. But I think they've been, the young guys, if you will, have done a good job.
Okay. Thanks, Rod.
Yeah, you got it.
Big thanks to Rod Brind'Amour for giving us some insights on what he was looking at in terms of the contract with Jarvis and Necas and what they're hoping to do for the first game of the preseason against Tampa. And looking at the Jarvis deal, it was kind of straightforward. It's like you're glad you get locked up Jarvis, and Rod said as long as you're here, if it's for 1 year or 100 years, you're here just to come do your job, and that's what he's hoping for with Seth. And it's good to have him long term. Now, with the Martin Necas things, it was very interesting how his aspects of that, he's the fact that he kind of feels for Marty and the fact that the last 3 years or so, however long, for as long as he's been here, he's always been part of, contract disputes or, does he fit right with the team or what's going on with Martin Necas? Does he need a bigger role? Like, is he going to stay in Carolina? Is he leaving? And it seems like that really ramped up over the last couple of years, especially this past offseason. And it's one of those things where Rod could be like, yeah, that's kind of tough for a guy, having to go through every single year of his career that he's been with the Hurricanes and having to deal with the question marks of, does he fit the system? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? So even with the 2-year deal that he got, you're still asking questions. Okay, well, is this going to be a move at the deadline this year? Is it a move next offseason, or is it a move next year? And that's a lot of, question marks for a guy who's, viewed pretty well by teammates and even the front office. And they even asked Rod about the role, and you heard it about the role that they're hoping for with Martin Necas. And for him, it's like, it's not really about role. It's just counting on you more. Like, he's like, what more of a role do you need other than, okay, yeah, you're on the PP1, which where you wanted to be. And from what Rod said, it sounds like that Marty wants to play PK. I know everyone's talked about how he wants to be a center, and Rod put it a perfect way. And I think too, it's not so much of like what your role is with this team, because in terms of what Rod's always said, there's never really lines with the Hurricanes. It's just who he's having in that particular game, because he rolls all 4 lines. There's not really one set group. And that's kind of the thing where you're looking at with the roles too, of where this isn't a roles situation for the Hurricanes. This is a more of like, we have to count on you more. And he even said they're going to have to count on Svetch, Aho, Jarvis, and even Martin Necas for the fact that with the depth that they had, with Teuvo Teravainen and Steph Nason, those are gone. You don't have those guys anymore. So now you might have to rely on your top 4 core that you have of the forward group, which is, like I said, Jarvis, Aho, Svetch, and Necas. Now it's like, okay, you are the 4 big guys on the team right now for the forward group, and we really need to lean on you. So that's kind of where Rod's looking at it as we aren't really going to be necessarily designing roles. It's like, okay, this is what your role and that's it. It's more of how are the games going? Are you progressing better? Are you doing the things we need to? Then maybe we will give you more opportunities on the ice. So now it turns into, this is your designated role. This is it, to where it's we're going to have to need you more than ever. So now it's going to be, okay, here's more opportunities. Here's your chance to keep proving it's why you should be playing more hockey, getting more ice time. So now, like I said, that turns into roles, as into we are depending on you and counting on you. And I think that's a good way to look at it in terms of the Carolina Hurricanes, that's just where we're at right now. And the fact of what the depth is, where the team is moving forward, we're going to need you. There's no, okay, this is what your role is, then that's it for the night. Now, it could be changing every day. And Rod even said when we were talking about, the preseason game later on tonight, there's plans, but things change. And that's kind of where it is with the Hurricanes right now in terms of looking at this roster and how, you don't know what your top 6 is yet. Teuvo Teravainen's gone. Is it Jack Roslovic? Is it going to be a Bradley Nadeau? Jackson Blake? How's that top 6 look? And then also, how does the bottom 6 look? You don't have Jesper Fast anymore for the season. Is it going to be a William Carrier when he's back? Is he with the Jordans? Is it going to be Jackson Blake? Is it Felix Unger-Sorum? If Carrier is back, okay, is it a Eric Robinson, Brendan Lemieux, 4th line? Is Jost a 13th forward? That's just a lot of things where you want to have a lot of plans figured out, but you don't know really where you're at, and especially how early on we into camp into preseason. We'll have to see how everything kind of plays out and go from there, because you really can't plan anything. So that's just kind of where we're with the Hurricanes right now. But yeah, I think the big main thing from that whole small press conference on Monday with Rod is, Necas, there's it's not really much of a role for him. It's more of like, how dependable can we rely on you? And if you can be someone that we can rely on a lot more, then you're going to get more ice time. You're going to get more opportunities. It's not just here's your designated thing and that's it. It's now we're going to have to lean on you a lot more, so be ready. And that's kind of what we're looking at. So with all that being said, we are finally getting to previewing our first preseason game for the Carolina Hurricanes as they take on the Tampa Bay Lightning at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida at 7 o'clock later tonight. So make sure to stick around as we dive into more of that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that keeps you finding quality candidates fast. So ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. The one of the things I like about Indeed is the fact that it makes hiring all in one place super easy if you're an employer trying to find a way to find the people that fit your specific job in perfectly. And then also, too, if you're someone who's looking for a job, you can make it easier on yourself by doing some quick search engines and make it a cater to your feed of what jobs you're looking for. And by doing all of that, employers are leveraging over 140 million qualifications through Indeed and preferences every day. So that way, with Indeed's matching engine, it's constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets at finding candidates that fit your actual request and need. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Once again, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Well, you just need Indeed. All right, guys, we got to talk about PrizePicks. And PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you need to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the only local money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still live. And one good thing I like about it too, for the fact that in terms of with hockey coming up and stuff like that, you can actually be able to bet, be able to pick selections on how many goals, assists, saves and stuff like that for certain players. That's gonna be a really cool thing to kind of look at too, and be able to do that and pick guys for certain games as the days and weeks roll on through the season. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And we are super excited to finally get to preview a preseason game for your Carolina Hurricanes. Like I said at the end of segment 2, they're going to be playing against Tampa Bay Lightning on the road at Amalie Arena in Tampa at 7 o'clock Eastern. The game will be on the Hurricanes website at thehurricanes.com. Most likely they will have links to the radio side of things if you're not able to as well on the app. So make sure to go check that out and to hear how you're able to listen to the game as well. Now, one quick rule for everyone who doesn't know when it comes to dressing players and all that. So when it comes to how that all works out is that you have to have 8 veterans on the team to be able to dress for a certain game. And how that works out is a forward defenseman who have played in 30 AHL games during the previous season. This would include most of, how it works out for that. So basically you have to play at least 30 games in the AHL if you're a forward or a defenseman and stuff like that. But if you've played more, then you're not really eligible. But also too, it's just looking at how a goaltender is for goalies who have dressed in 50 or more AHL games or have played in 30 AHL games in the previous season. So you look at how that is. It's just one of those things where that's kind of where you're looking in terms of what the veteran status is. And then for the rest of the roster, you're talking a first-round pick for the most recent, entry drafts and stuff like that. And then anyone who's played 100 or more AHL games as well. It turns into a lot of weird things of how you want to look at how the rosters are set up for those type of games. So that's why you only get really 8 veterans of those guys who've played a certain number of games past those thresholds. So if you've played under a certain number of games and you're not really considered a veteran, you're still able to be a part of the roster. So you're looking at a lot of the prospects, maybe some guys who played last year but didn't really get to that benchmark of those certain number of games you're looking at. But yeah, so that's where you see you might have certain fringe guys that could be playing in the first game, and then you might see a mix of, let's say, maybe a Martinook, maybe a Jordan Stahl, maybe look at one of the defensemen like a Jalen Chatfield or someone like that. So don't expect a very heavy NHL loaded roster for game 1 just because the fact you have to go with at least 8 of those guys. So that's why you have PTOs like Sam Gagner and Rocco Grimaldi, Skylar Brind'Amour, where they didn't really get to play a lot of games last year in the NHL, so that's why they kind of fit into that mold of they might not really fit veteran stats, so you can kind of use them. So that's just kind of where you're looking at in terms of how the rosters are. It's a very weird, complex thing of the CBA rules and how you have to have your roster set up and all that. So it's very interesting how it works out, but that's just kind of what you're looking at. In terms of what the plan is and who the goalies are going to be and stuff like that, of course, no one really knows. We're going to know probably later on today. It's just, Rod Brind'Amour and his staff like to keep things to the vest, so you really don't know what the roster technically is going into the first game. It could be completely different than what you think it's going to be. So we'll kind of get a general idea as we get farther on into the preseason, kind of know the ins and outs of what the Hurricanes are looking for and how they're going to work that out in terms of their rosters. But as of right now, I would not really expect anything in terms of, who specifically is going to be in until we know for sure from the Carolina Hurricanes. But that's kind of it for just preview. I mean, it's the first preseason game. It's going to be Tampa. They're not going to bring their big guys out very much either. The Hurricanes are going to go with a lot of prospects. And like I said, then you got to fit 8 veteran players on your roster. It could be pretty much anyone. So I'd say just keep a really close eye out on socials for the Carolina Hurricanes, whether it be on X or Instagram or even the website. They'll let you know who's going to be playing. It's just, like I said, it's preseason game 1. It's a lot easier once we get into the regular season where it's, okay, you know who your roster is. This is what the lines are going to look like and stuff like that. For preseason, it's up in the air. You don't really know because how the rosters are supposed to be shaped up and then who's going to be playing certain days and stuff like that. So Rod said there's a plan, but apparently things change for the plans. But I hope everyone enjoyed this Tuesday episode of Locked On Hurricanes. If you want to keep up with anything that's going on with me in terms of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Chicago Wolves, you can follow me at X at OneTrueZach. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. There's a link tree in my bio if you want to click on and check out all my articles at the Hockey Writers where it comes to the Hurricanes, Wolves, and now helping out THW with some Stars content as well if you're interested in some Western Conference stuff. There's also links to my other podcast, The Searchcast, where you can also look up The Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. And there's also links for this podcast as well in my link tree to where you can listen and watch the show. But if you want to go search for it, just go Locked On Hurricanes on all podcast platforms where you listen. YouTube, it's the same thing. You just go search for it. And make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know you like the show as well, so it gets us out to more fans just like you, because we want them to become everydayers just like you. So make sure to share the podcast as well, because we are closing in on 980 subscribers, but our goal right now is to hit 1,000, because if we hit 1,000, I might just do something special for you guys. But like I said, I hope everyone enjoyed this Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Tuesday. I hope everyone gets to enjoy the first preseason game for your Carolina Hurricanes. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.